The word psychosis tends to conjure up images of a person who has lost touch with reality. So this could look like a person who is talking to themselves or who is extremely paranoid. But the thing is, a person doesn't just wake up one day and they're like that. That's not how psychosis works. That's actually just a mere fraction of the whole experience. Psychosis actually has an initial onset phase. This is the prodromal phase, and the prodromal phase is when these symptoms start to appear. The first symptoms to appear in a psychotic episode do not look like talking to yourself and being paranoid. They actually look a lot more like depression. These first symptoms, called negative symptoms, are symptoms that result in a loss of or lack of ability where there once was plenty. So this is losing interest in things, this is losing motivation. That's why it looks like depression, because when a person is depressed, they tend to have a loss of interest, they tend to have a loss of drive. But the thing about these negative symptoms is that they're distinct from depression. They may look like depression, but they're not depression, they're psychotic symptoms. Now, it can seem strange that a disorder like psychosis, which looks a lot like hallucinations and delusions, could have symptoms that involve not having motivation, but you have to understand that while there are negative symptoms, there are also positive symptoms. Positive symptoms will add onto a person's experience of reality, and that would look like additions to reality, like hallucinations and delusions. To understand negative symptoms, I think it helps to know that, because negative symptoms are the opposite. They are a subtraction from your experience of reality. That is why they are a loss of. They are parts of your reality that you've lost, that you no longer have, that you can't function with anymore. So what are some of these losses? Well, there are 5 major negative symptoms. There are Alogia, Anhedonia, Avolition, flat affect, and Asociality. Let's start there, since that one is pretty easy to explain. Asociality is becoming withdrawn from social settings. So a person who may have previously been very outgoing would draw away from their friend groups. They might be less involved with activities. They would not be answering messages or phone calls anymore. They would pretty much just become very isolated. Isolation is a huge indicator of psychosis, because when people tend to start to isolate, they are experiencing the symptom of asociality. So this is a loss of social aspects of your life. Then there's anhedonia, which is a loss of pleasure in doing things that you'd normally love. If, say, you had hobbies, like maybe you were into knitting or something, you wouldn't get any pleasure out of that anymore. Like, you might still be able to do the activity, but it won't bring you any joy or satisfaction. You'll have no interest in it. So a lot of people drop out of their interests and hobbies because they just don't get anything out of it anymore. For me personally, I love art and I love to draw. And I went 3 years without drawing because of this symptom, because I couldn't even bring myself to do it. It was a chore to me. I didn't want to do it. You know, it's not like I was repulsed by it. I actually missed it and I wanted to do it, but there was something in me that was disconnected where I just could not. Then avolition kind of ties these together, because avolition is a loss of motivation or a loss of drive to do basic things. And we are talking very, very basic things. We are talking literally the fundamentals of keeping up your self-care. So struggling with hygiene, not brushing your teeth, bathing, brushing your hair, not eating, not cooking for yourself or feeding yourself at all, not getting out of bed, missing appointments, not answering emails, not paying bills, avoiding, calls. It just goes on, because this is any aspect of your life that requires any motivation at all. So it is very hard to show up and perform in any aspect of your life when you have no drive. That's where asociality and anhedonia come in, because these can also be affected by avolition. When you lack the drive or motivation to reach out to people, you tend to become socially withdrawn. And when you lack the motivation or drive to finish that birdhouse you were building, it won't get done and you won't have any pleasure in doing that anymore. So avolition is essentially a loss of being able to do basic things. Alogia is one that I find very interesting because I knew I struggled with my speech in psychosis, but when I told people that this was something that happened to me, they thought I had exaggerated, or they thought that I was making things up, that I was trying to get attention of some kind, when I would say I literally couldn't talk. Like, I lost the ability to speak. Because alogia is the loss of speech ability. And this can look like a few different things. For me, it was the complete inability to speak. Mostly complete inability to speak. I could answer yes or no questions, and that was my capacity. I could not answer any more than that. Some people won't speak at all, and this applies to all forms of communication. So this wouldn't just be speaking, this would be writing, this would be texting. Some people can answer questions only. Some people can give very brief, limited responses and not necessarily elaborate or expound on what they had just said. Some people will talk very slowly. So all across the board, these are losses of a person's ability to communicate through speech. And the final major negative symptom is flat affect. Flat affect is quite apparent. This is something that you can easily see in a person. This kind of symptom is right out there in the open. This is a loss of emotional, like anything, just not having any expression or, like tone in your voice. You would just have a monotone voice and look very expressionless. It's that simple. It is quite jarring to see someone with a flat affect because there's clearly a loss of there, and that would be the loss of emotional response. These are the signs you're looking for in addressing psychosis. These are the early warning signs and the initial symptoms going into a psychotic episode. So while in the prodromal phase, these are the things that will come on first, and this can last anywhere from years to a few weeks to pretty quick, actually. The prodromal phase moves into the acute phase when the positive symptoms start to appear. So however long that prodromal phase is, whether it be a long time or a short time, it will come to an end and begin the next phase when you start to have hallucinations and delusions. These are the positive symptoms that I mentioned earlier. These are the symptoms that add on to a person's experience of reality. Basically, if you think of it as reality being this one plane that everybody is on, someone in psychosis will have another plane above that with hallucinations and delusions. Their reality is like superimposed on top of normal reality. They're in reality. They're still there with you. You can still talk to them. They're still your friend or family member, but they're also having this addition to their reality, which is one that no one else can experience. These symptoms of hallucinations and delusions are false. They are false reality. They are not real. They are only real to the person experiencing them. And they do seem very, very realistic, which is why it's so hard to tell that they're not true. But to anyone else, they may seem simply illogical because a lot of them are very bizarre. With hallucinations, you have 5 different types. There's a different type of hallucination for every sense that a person has, because hallucinations are essentially your senses engaged with a false sense. They're having sensations to things that aren't really there. And this can look like sight. You might see things that aren't real. You can hear things that aren't real, smell things that aren't real, taste things that aren't real, and touch things that aren't real. These can be very strange things. People might see shadow people, which is a fairly common one, or hear voices. For me personally, I tend to hear really boring, ordinary stuff like doorbells and car engines, while also having, blood-curdling screams. It's very scary. Hallucinations themselves are, I feel like, a little easier to understand than delusions, because delusions are not as tangible. Because yeah, you can have a tangible hallucination and you can actually feel physically, say, a bug crawling up your arm. But delusions are completely intangible and cannot be sensed. They are fixed, false beliefs. These are essentially beliefs that a person holds on to so firmly that even if you gave any proof or evidence that what they believe is not true, they simply cannot not believe it. And I mean cannot. There is a complete lack of ability to believe otherwise. That's part of the nature of the symptom, is that delusions cannot be shaken. So as illogical as they may seem, there's no refuting it to the person in psychosis. They cannot believe any other way. Just as there are many types of hallucinations, there are many types of delusions. There are grandiose delusions, or delusions of grandeur, which are essentially a delusion of an inflated sense of self. A person may think very highly of themselves. They may think that they have heightened super abilities, or that they are incredibly gifted or talented in some way. They may think that they are more attractive or more intelligent, or that they are connected to powerful people. But they also may have these really wild ones of believing they are a god, or that they are a messenger of God, or that they have been chosen to save the world. So this inflated sense of self would be a grandiose delusion. Persecutory delusions are the most common delusion, and this is where paranoia heavily comes into play. Persecutory delusions are the delusion that you are being preyed upon, that you will be harmed in some way. People become very suspicious that maybe their loved ones are plotting against them, or the FBI is spying on them. They may think they are being bugged, they are being followed, they may think they are being plotted against. Whatever really scary situation they may be spinning in their head is essentially a persecution against them. Erotomanic delusions are very strong infatuations with another person, typically a powerful person or a celebrity, someone of importance, and they're generally not people who even know who this person is. Someone may have the delusion that this celebrity is in love with them and may even be in a relationship with them. And this person can become very fixated on that individual and may even get jealous if they see them, say, talking to another person, or if they have their own partner. And this one is also very hard to shake, because while you may think that they're obsessed with you, you are in fact obsessed with them. Somatic delusions are delusions that have to do with one's body. So these would be delusions that something is wrong with the body, something is different, something is not right. They can be medical, like believing that a person has some sort of like cancer or illness. Maybe they believe that their body parts have been taken or organs have been harvested. They may also be related to sensations of the body, like feeling that you have bugs crawling under your skin, or having like wires and coils in your mouth. That's another common one. So these are anything to do with what could possibly go wrong with the body. Religious delusions are faith-based delusions. What's interesting about religious delusions is that although they may apply to Buddhism or Judaism or Christianity, the person who experiences them isn't necessarily of that faith. A lot of people who have religious delusions are atheists or agnostic, and the prevalence of a religion in a country is an indicator of how common that delusion may be. So in heavily religious societies, people may have religious delusions, even of a religion that isn't their own, if it tends to be the dominant religion in their area. Some religious delusions that I've had include believing I'm Jesus, believing I'm the Virgin Mary, believing I'm the Virgin Mary pregnant with Jesus, believing I'm pregnant with the Antichrist, believing I'm possessed by demons and need an exorcism, and believing that I'm God. These are just a handful of delusions. There are way more types of delusions I would love to get into in later videos, but we are just focusing on the basics here today of the phases of psychosis. So there you have it. We have had the negative symptoms of the prodromal phase and now the positive symptoms of the acute phase. Now the acute phase can, like the prodromal phase, last for a very long time or a very short time, and there are differing factors in the longevity of an episode. Depending on what caused the episode, an episode may be resolved without medication, although for a lot of people, they will need medication to come out of the episode and stay out of further psychotic episodes. But there are so many different causes for psychosis. It really isn't just a one and done deal. There is no one disorder. Even of the psychotic disorders, there are so many. You have schizophrenia, schizoaffective disorder, you have delusional disorder, you have paranoid personality disorder. I'm not sure if that's on the spectrum, but even outside of the spectrum, you have bipolar with psychotic features, you have major depression with psychotic features. They're not even on the psychotic spectrum, let me tell you. They just happen to have psychotic features. Obsessive compulsive disorder can have psychotic features. Dissociative identity disorder can have psychotic features. Those are just the disorders. You can have psychosis from alcohol, marijuana, steroids, antihistamines. You can have psychosis from pretty much any substance imaginable. Some people just have the wrong reaction. Some people are addicts and they get it through their recreational drug use. Other people get it through prescriptions from their doctor. I've heard of many people who've gotten it from steroids, and I never thought that could have been possible, but really, it can be like pretty much any substance. Some other heavy hitters are grief, stress, and sleep deprivation. These all tend to induce psychosis, like in really significant cases. I know so many people who don't have a psychotic disorder, who've only ever had one episode, and the episode was caused because their loved one had died at the same time that they lost their job and they were too stressed to sleep. That kind of a combination is enough to cause a psychotic break. You can also have psychosis from postpartum and from traumatic brain injuries. So things you would never even suspect, like childbirth and car accidents can induce psychosis. In the case of a lot of these, what you need to do is stop the primary issue causing psychosis. So if the cause of psychosis is substances, you would stop using that substance. If the cause was sleep deprivation, you would catch up on your sleep, and those can resolve it for a lot of people. For people whose primary issue is psychosis, in the case of people who have mental disorders, as I mentioned, the medication would be the best route to go. Not everybody chooses this route. Everyone is entitled to their own decision. However, I know for me personally, medication is the only thing that works. Literally nothing else can stop me from being psychotic. And as soon as I go off my medication, I guarantee within a month, I will be in another psychotic episode. How do I know this? Because I've made that poor choice too many times. And I know better now, which is why I will be on medication for life. No matter the cause and no matter what a person may do to resolve it, everybody has to go through the recovery phase. The acute phase gets a lot of credibility for being arduous and horrifying and incredibly difficult to get through, but the recovery phase is arguably just as hard. The recovery phase is incredibly depleting and depressing because the person coming out of psychosis will be losing the symptoms that have consumed their reality and will be coming to realize that none of it actually happened. this is heartbreaking. At least it was for me, to realize that entire people I thought I knew weren't real, and that entire situations I had survived didn't happen. It was confusing, it was disorienting, it was depressing. It was more than anything depressing, and I cannot think of a more perfect word for describing the recovery phase than depressing. It is a long road to recovery. This phase is slow progress over a drastically long amount of time. This phase can take a minimum of 6 months to heal from. Obviously, that's not true of everyone. There are absolutely people who recover faster than that. But for me, I have never been able to recover quickly. My longest recovery phase was roughly 18 months before I finally felt better. And by better, I mean that I no longer had symptoms and I had regained some cognitive abilities that I'd lost because I couldn't write and read at the end. For instance, I had to recover my own beliefs. I had to accept reality for what it is. And that might have been the hardest part. The reality I knew was exciting and heightened and constantly changing and terrifying and very, very consuming. There's no way of not engaging with that kind of an experience. But to come out of that and to have that all disappear and be back in reality it's jarring, because I forgot what reality was like. I literally didn't have any concept of what reality had been like before psychosis. So now I'm back in it and I'm like, oh, this is reality? This sucks. I didn't want to accept this reality, but I had no choice because I'm in it now. I'm stuck here, just like everyone else. However, upon discovering what reality actually is, I almost had to adopt a whole new life. It was like starting my entire life over again, because I could never get back to where I'd been before psychosis. That part of my life was totally shut down. And where I've picked myself up from post-psychosis is kind of where my life started, because I just could never go back to what I had been like before. There's so much of me that I lost in my episodes, and there's so much that's changed about me, just fundamentally too. I don't mean just the hair color. I mean, everything changed. My values, my beliefs, even outside of psychosis, my beliefs have completely changed. And it was sort of shaped by that traumatic experience. So for me, it started with having symptoms, then having symptoms and sometimes being aware of the symptoms, and then being aware of the symptoms, and then pockets of time without symptoms, but going back to symptoms, to longer pockets of time, and then no symptoms at all. That gradual decline of coming out of the symptoms alone took about 4 to 6 months each time I had an episode. And then from there would still be more months of recovery, because it wasn't just about recovering my stability in my mind back of not having symptoms. It was recovering me. I had been traumatized. I had been through literal hell, and getting back up on my own 2 feet and thinking clearly again and speaking coherently, all of these really basic things had to be recovered. Now, all of this is harrowing. Every single phase of psychosis sucks. But the great thing is that it can be prevented if you know what to look for and if you know the signs. Hopefully this video has illustrated a little bit what that looks like. When I've been in psychotic episodes before, I generally couldn't tell that I was going psychotic. But after having learned about these 3 phases and the symptoms in each phase, I was actually able to identify my last episode while it was coming on. And because of that, I got an intervention. I went to the hospital and was properly medicated and was able to come out of it faster with less damage. It was a much shorter experience. It wasn't as scary. So it's possible to prevent psychotic episodes. It really is. If you know what to look for and if you can catch it, you can avoid a lot of the things I just told you all about. So anyway, thank you so much for watching my video. I really appreciate it and I hope you enjoyed. I put out videos every Monday and Thursday, so stick around if you'd like to see more of those. As always, please like, comment, subscribe, and let me know in the comments what your experience has been like with these phases of psychosis. Anyway, I will see you all in the next one. Thank you. Bye.